Hey y'all, Trevor here. You couldn't tell already, I'm a pretty big Scott The Woz fan. Week in and week out, Scott puts out consistently quality and hilarious content, with most of his videos being well over 20 minutes long. His constant grind and ability to make me laugh consistently is unmatched, and he will always have my respect. But there's one problem. He's a liar. Exhibit A, on May 7th, 2017, Scott uploaded a video to his YouTube channel titled, GameCube Was Best. That's my only exhibit. I don't know why I said Exhibit A. Come on, Scott. You aren't even trying to hide the fact that you're a liar. The title of your video is literally a lie. In this video, Scott states the Nintendo GameCube is the greatest Nintendo console of all time, with atrocious claims like the GameCube having the most Nintendo franchise representation of all the Nintendo consoles. Well, let me ask you this, Scott. Does your precious GameCube play Superman 64? Didn't think so. Allow me to introduce you to the actual greatest Nintendo console of all time, the Nintendo 64. But first, a little bit of history. In 1993, the development of the Nintendo 64 was announced under codename Project Reality. Nintendo was partnering with Silicon Graphics to bring our favorite video game characters into the third dimension. In 1994, an early prototype of Project Reality was unveiled, and the product was given an official name, the Ultra 64. You know, I quite like the original name of the Nintendo 64. I thought the name made perfect sense. First you started out with regular old plain Jade Nintendo, and then you take it up a notch with Super Nintendo, and the only logical next step was Ultra Nintendo. Maybe if Nintendo continued naming their consoles with this system, we'd have a much cooler name than the Nintendo Switch. Maybe it'd be something like Super Ultra Mega Hyper Demon Slaying Nintendo. With knuckles. We're getting off track. In November of 1995, the Ultra 64 was fully unveiled to the world with a new name, the Nintendo 64. It was rumored that Nintendo was forced to change the name due to Konami having the rights to the name, as one of their secondary companies was named Ultra Games. However, Nintendo's president at the time claims the name change was due to Nintendo's desire to have the branding of the console be the same worldwide. Even though Ultra 64 would have been a badass name, I guess that makes sense. Finally, on September 26th, the Nintendo 64 was released in the US. The original date was actually set for September 29th, but some retailers who had already received their shipment of the console decided to sell it early. Some parents were complaining about the system being released on a school night anyways, so instead of sending the Nintendo Ninjas after them, Nintendo just changed the release date to 3 days earlier. The Nintendo 64 released alongside Pilot Wing 64 and Super Mario 64, with Super Mario 64 selling at almost a 1-to-1 ratio with the console, but we'll talk about games later. Here it is, Project Reality, Ultra 64, the Nintendo 64. The design of this console was one of my favorites. The NES looked like a VCR and Betamax player, and the Super Nintendo looked like a big ugly Lego. Also, I appreciate the choice to go with mostly black in terms of colors. The NES and SNES tend to get pretty ugly over time with a brownish color, meanwhile my Nintendo 64 still looks gorgeous. The Nintendo 64 was also the first Nintendo console to feature 4 controller ports, which led to some of my favorite childhood memories, playing games like Mario Kart 64, Super Smash Bros., and GoldenEye with a room full of friends. Nintendo also offered an expansion pack that adds an additional 4 megabytes of RAM, allowing for games like Donkey Kong 64 and Majora's Mask to have slightly upgraded graphics and more expansive environments. But what's a console without a controller? I guess the Kinect, but we don't talk about the Kinect. Here it is, the Nintendo 64 controller. What the f*** is this? Yeah, it's no secret that the Nintendo 64 controller isn't the most popular by any means. Nintendo seemed to have this idea that they could combine a classic controller and a modern controller together. The idea being if you're playing a newer 3D game, to play with your left hand on the middle arm and to use the joystick, and if you're playing a traditional 2D game, to play with your left hand on the left arm and use the D-pad. But if you ever see someone holding a Nintendo 64 controller like this, have them committed immediately. I guess it was a good idea in theory, but it just wasn't executed well at all. Those of us who grew up with a Nintendo 64 don't really think about it all that much, but try playing a modern shooter for a few hours and then hook up your N64 and play some GoldenEye. It is not ideal. But what's a console without games? I guess the Wii U. We don't talk about the Wii U. The Nintendo 64 literally set the standard for what these new 3D games were supposed to be. You got Sega fiddling around in the corner over there trying to claim Sonic 3D Blast as a 3D platformer, but we all know the truth. Games like Super Mario 64, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and Donkey Kong 64 came out and put the competition to shame. And people will still defend some of these games as the best video games of all time until the day they die. The Nintendo 64 has a ton of exclusive games that either brought uniqueness to the console with games like Jet Force Gemini or Diddy Kong Racing, or started entire legacies with games like Super Smash Bros. Or Mario Party. I'll go over a few of my favorites. Super Mario 64 is a blast from start to finish. The controls are still better than a lot of modern games, and it will never not be fun. This was the first time Nintendo opted for less levels, but instead much larger levels with multiple objectives in each of them in a Mario game. this set the standard for most future 3D Mario games. I don't actually own The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, but I've played through it many different times in many different variations, including the 3DS, Wii, and Wii U Virtual Console. Again, this game set the standard for the future of the Zelda series, and many still hail it as the greatest video game of all time. This game has some of my favorite dungeons in the series, and the time travel aspect of the game is still one of my favorite video game curveballs of all time. It isn't my favorite Zelda game, but I most definitely respect it. The greatest Star Fox game of all time lives on the Nintendo 64. Nintendo has been trying to replicate the magic of Star Fox 64 for 20 years, sometimes intentionally, and other times unintentionally. I love this game. I've played through it multiple times and it never gets old. There's never a dull moment. This is not a game where you can occasionally glance over at your phone. Oh no sir. The moment you take your eyes off the screen, you hear Falco scream, "Hey Einstein, I'm on your side!" and you've crashed into the side of a mountain. Mario Party, everyone's favorite game to play while shit-faced wasted. Seriously, get yourself 3 friends and a bottle of your favorite liquor and you'll be in for a treat. The game that started it all, and surprisingly, even though it's the first, it's still better than about half of the franchise. The boards are the perfect size and there is a ton of variety. Luigi's Engine Room is my personal favorite. The goal is simple. Strategically traverse your way around the board, collect coins, and play minigames to earn even more coins, with the ultimate goal being to have the most stars at the end of the game. Then you lose because Wario got a stupid bonus star for landing on the most green space. Mario Kart 64 is one of the only Nintendo 64 games I don't often come back to. I have some great memories sitting in my garage with friends and duking it out in balloon battle. Unfortunately, with every release of a new Mario Kart, the chances of me going back to Mario Kart 64 again decreases. Mario Kart is just one of those game franchises that with every new entry, there is no incentive to go back to older games, with only a few exceptions. Plus, have you ever gone back and played Mario Kart 64? This game is super hard. I don't think I've gotten worse at video games, but Mario Kart 64's controls are just super stiff, and I find myself going off the track more often than in other Mario Kart games. Now my favorite racing game on the Nintendo 64, F-Zero X. Something about this game just puts some freaking hair on your chest. Everything about this game is fast and in your face. It's also unforgiving. This might be the only racing game that I more often than not don't even finish the race because my car explodes. It probably takes me a good hour to get back in my groove and actually be able to compete in this game. But if you pick this game up for the first time in a while, be prepared for your vehicle to explode. A lot. Oh, I almost forgot. The music is also fantastic. Finally, not just my favorite Nintendo 64 game, but my favorite video game of all time, the original Super Smash Bros. Unlike Mario Kart 64, this is a game I'm always down to come back to. I couldn't tell you the last time I played Smash 4, Brawl, or Melee, but I can tell you the last time I played Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64. It was last week, and I beat my brother 3 times in a row. I'll go ahead and cut my rambling off here as I've already covered this game in its own video. Link will be in the description, but in short, it's pretty damn good. While the GameCube may have had more franchise representation, as I've said many times throughout the length of this video, Nintendo 64 set the standard for 3D games and modern games in general. Without the Nintendo 64, some of our favorite modern games like Super Mario Odyssey, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Party, and of course Super Smash Bros. Ultimate would either not exist at all or be very different. And that's why I think the Nintendo 64 is the greatest Nintendo console of all time. So what do you have to say to that, Scott? That's fair. Hold up, pause the outro. Quick side note, I just wanted to let you all know that I have decided to attempt to do this whole YouTube thing full time, so expect a whole lot more content coming your way. Also, I have opened up my very own Patreon page, so if you'd like to support the channel beyond just subscribing, liking, and commenting, which I already greatly appreciate, you can check out the link to my Patreon page in the description below. If you choose to support me through Patreon, you will get access to exclusive content that can only be found there. Alright, that's it. We're good. Roll the outro.